Hello everybody. About 10 years ago I wrote an email to a friend about sowing seeds too early, and that article or that email helped them enormously. So about 4 or 5 years ago I rewrote it and published it as on an internet gardening forum. That one was called Gardener's Corner. I'll put a link down below to that site, and today I'm actually going to put it onto video because I think it's necessary that this is got out there for people to understand what's going on at this time of the year with seed sowing. Now, if a seed supplier writes on his envelope that to sow your seeds in March or April, he or she knows that that's the best possible time of the year for his or her seeds. They've assessed it over and they want you to get the best results from their seeds. And they know with the day length at that time of the year and the ever increasing daylight hours as the year goes on will be beneficial to the germination and the growing on of your young plants. So even after you've germinated the seeds and you're growing them on, the daylight levels are still increasing, those plants will grow on better, and then by the time they're ready to go into the ground, the daylight length is perfect, and that's why they've recommended those times of March and April. So that is my view of what is written on the back of a seed packet. That's my interpretation of it, because I know I can sow seeds earlier or later and pretty much do what I want with them with a bit of knowledge that I've gained over the decades that I've been gardening. And there are lots of gardeners out there, and everyone will have their particular way of sowing seeds, growing plants. They might only have one particular windowsill that will start seeds off in the year, or they might have the whole conservatory or a polytunnel or greenhouse heated or unheated, misting devices, irrigation, lights, all kinds of things to help them cheat the system and to get seeds going earlier or later, or to bring them on quicker. Anything that will, just give them that edge that they need to get things going earlier. Because naturally, if you are limited for space, like I am in some degrees, though you wouldn't think so down here, I'm limited for space to getting plants started, so I cheat the system to get things going and move them on down here, and then I can get something else going at home. So this is why a lot of gardeners do that, but that leads to a lot of problems. Now, the problem with the more experienced gardener putting that experience to use and getting bigger and better plants growing earlier is that the newcomer to gardening thinks that that's the way it should be, and they will look at their own plants and think, well, what am I doing wrong? When you're not actually doing anything wrong. If you follow the seed packet instructions and you've got a plant that's sort of 2 inches, 3 inches tall, but then you'll go and watch a gardening TV program or a video on YouTube or look in magazines, and at that same time of the year, the same plants that somebody else has grown are this big. But it's because they're putting that extra knowledge to use that they're that big. But what then happens is that new gardener thinks that next year I'm going to try and grow my plants earlier. And this is what's happening, and this is why I've made this video, because a lot of gardeners don't really have that knowledge or the facilities to be able to maintain that plant by sowing and growing them earlier. And doom and gloom then sets in. First of all, if your compost is just too wet and cold and you put seed into it, the seed's just going to rot, or they're just not going to germinate. And after a few weeks you think this isn't working, and you go to the shop or to another supplier or another garden centre and you buy another variety of seed and you try and sow them, and they're still not working. Eventually you will get a seed to germinate. As the weather warms up and the day lengthens and you get more sunlight in a day, you will eventually get plants to germinate, but they'll be so far behind everybody else's. And even then, if there's not enough light in the day, the plants can become stretched out. They'll start to become etiated, and that just means stretched and drawn out. The plant is racing ahead looking for daylight and can't find it, when really the plant at that size wants to be putting down roots into that soil that you've provided for it to make a good, strong, healthy plant. And then when the daylight is readily available for it, then it can flourish because it's got the root system to back it up. And this is where the doom and gloom sets in, and we're sowing your seeds too early. If you haven't got that knowledge already, can be a disadvantage to yourself and cause you many problems, and yeah, it's just not good. So what do you do, Steve? What's the answer, I hear you ask? And the thing is, if for instance you want, say, like 6 tomato plants, and that's all you want to grow that particular year, then save double the amount of seeds, so 12 seeds, to make sure that you get your 6 plants, and the others you can divide up into sowing days, and you can maybe sow one 2 weeks before, then 4 weeks before, and then 6 weeks before, and see what results you get. See how the plants grow, see if they thrive, or see if they stretch out, become etiated, see if you get a good crop from them, see if they make a good root ball. But if you can check all these things out for yourself and write your own little script so that you know what you're doing, and that's exactly what the gardeners have done in their own past when they've learned all these things and produced the plant that's this tall in comparison to yours that's this small. I do it all the time. I'm always running tests, and many of the gardeners out there are doing that. They'll sow seeds in a tray like normal, but they'll put another pinch somewhere else just to see what happens, because they've thought something different might happen. And this is really the key to gardening, is to continually test what your capabilities are and what the equipment you've got to use, or the garden that you're gardening in, can handle. So do bear that in mind. So here in the little tunnel we've got 3 trays of little seedlings. They're struggling along a little bit, but they're doing all right. But I sowed these a month ago. In this one is a loose leaf salad mix, similar to what I sowed the other day in the greenhouse. So that is a month on. Now they're going to be another month before they're of a seedling size, so that's 8 weeks, which is a long time for a lettuce, and they will only then be at a seedling size. So you're kind of looking at, if you sowed salads right now, you're looking at 8 weeks before they're big enough to plant out. But if you wait 8 weeks and then sow those plants, the same plants, in a couple of weeks those will be up as seedlings, because the daylight length will be longer and the warmth will be there for them. So they'll grow much better and much quicker than these are now. I'm only growing these in these trays because I want seedlings to eat. I don't want them to grow onto full-size lettuce. I know they're not going to do any good, and I will sow more before we're eating those, ready to go out in the garden. And it's the same with these things. These are brassicas and stuff in here. Again, you can look back on that video. I'll put a link up in the corner. But I'm only looking to get them to seedling size, and then we're going to scoff them. So now, I've already mentioned it a couple of times. One of the most important factors for growing seeds is you need the heat to get the seed to germinate in the soil and get out of the soil. But once it's out of the soil, those leaves need to photosynthesize. And right now in January, if your seedling is out of the soil, it's only getting about 7¼ hours daylight per day at the moment. It's the lowest levels of the year. And it is slightly increasing day by day, around 2 minutes a day. And when we're looking at sort of into February, it's about 8¾ hours, so it's improved by an hour and a half. But if you look then into March, it's 10¾ hours. So you're actually, in March, if you germinate your seeds and get them going there, they're actually getting a half of a January day extra in March than you are in January. And that's important, and that's why the seed suppliers are telling you to sow these seeds into March and April. And it's why these things are worth bearing in mind. Some plants you can get away with, others you can't. If you're growing leafy greens, waste of time. I mean, you'll see a lot of these lettuce varieties, they'll say they're winter hardy and they're for growing through the winter. But if you look at the sowing dates of them, they're all asking you or telling you to sow those seeds around about sort of August, September. Yes, there are exceptions, but not many. The majority of them are to sow in August and September, and then they will grow and survive through the winter months. They've got thicker leaves, they can survive that, but your average lettuce is just going to flop in the frost, and that's what's going to happen. So they won't get going at all. They need that sunlight as well as warmth. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that you don't sow at this time of the year, but just to be aware of what can happen and what is likely to happen if you do. Certainly lettuce and greens and those sorts of things, that they will grow, they will just grow very, very slowly. And as long as you're aware of that before you start, and don't put all your eggs into one basket, don't think that will be your one major crop. If you wait 2 months, you're going to have far more daylight hours and your plants will thrive and do a lot better. Now, having said that, I cheat the system all the time, and many of the gardeners you'll see out there on YouTube or on the internet do exactly the same thing, because they've built up that knowledge over the year. Half the plants on this hanging shelf of mine here, I mean, some of these, I mean, they're dead lettuce there, but half of the plants are plants that I cheated the system by starting them last autumn. Most of them are flowers, and they'll be bigger, healthier plants. I mean, they're good, healthy plants now, but they're hardy, so they will get through. And that, again, is part of cheating the system and comes with experience and time. I also, for instance, next month, I think it is towards the end of February, I sow tomatoes. Far too early to sow tomatoes, simply because you need, once a tomato plant is in the ground, you need a minimum temperature of 10 degrees at all times. Otherwise the plant just stops growing. It won't kill it, it won't completely stop it, it just slows it right down and knocks it to the floor. And that's no good for the plant at all. Sometimes they will get going again, other times they just won't, or they just won't produce the harvest that you would expect. But what I do with mine is a little bit clever, and again, born from experience over the years, is I grow my tomatoes that early and then I plant the side shoots on, because I know a side shoot plant will grow far better crops than an actual main plant. So by sowing that little bit earlier, I'm allowing the plant to grow up, take the side shoots off, plant those, and they will grow up and they will come in and be about the same size as the plant would be if I sowed it as we used to sow them. We used to sow tomatoes in May. That's when they used to be done before all this internet started. When the warm weather was there, they would thrive and get away. But I now have side shoot plants which I know are going to produce fruits right from the ground up, not from halfway up the plant up. So I get a much better crop and a harvest from that. So again, that's another way of cheating the system and making it work for me, just simply by experience. So do have a go at sowing earlier, but just don't bank all your crops on it. Just sow a few seeds, record the results, record when you sowed them, when you potted them on, when you planted them out, and what harvest you got from each of them. It does sound like a lot of work, and it is, but it will stand you in good stead for years to come, and it's something that shouldn't be overlooked. Just test all the time, do something silly, do something different out of the norm, and see what results you get and record them. That's the most important thing, so you can look back on them. And when I say record when you planted them, where you planted them, where you planted them out, what the weather was like, all of those different things, the temperatures, and you'll start to get a visual picture of what's going on over the years, and that will become a lot clearer as to what can and can't happen. So there we go. So that's it for today. Look after yourselves, everyone. Please stay safe, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Ta-ra now.